What's going on with the Giants special teams? Do Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones have a future with this team despite what's happened the last several weeks? All that and more coming up on a supersized Twitter Tuesday edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security. With Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. Hello, New York Giant fans. Welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, your host. Welcome to Twitter Tuesday, the day that we do your questions here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And we've got a lot to cover today. We have about 24 or so questions. We're going to get to them all on today's program. So thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Let us not waste any time here because we do have a lot to cover. We're going to jump right in. So let's get things going. All right. Up first, we have a question from Giants fan, NY Giants News 26, who wants to know, do you think this team has lost all their juice and steam and is going down a bad lane? Thank you so much for the question. I wouldn't say that exactly. I wouldn't say that the Giants have lost their juice, because to say that they have lost their juice would be to say that they just have given up. And I don't think that is the case with this team. What I would say is injuries have taken a toll on this team. I do not think they have, and I hate to use this expression because we're talking people, but it's a common expression. I don't think they have the necessary firepower to cross the finish line, the horses, if you will. They have guys that have not played certain positions before, certain roles before, that they're being forced to plug in, which we'll talk about a little later on when we get to topics like special teams. It's been, when you lose your starters and your backups to your starters, and now you're playing your third, fourth, fifth string players, that takes its toll. And I know coaches always say next man up and all that good stuff, but it does take its toll on a team. And I think that's what we're seeing here. But again, I do not think it's a case of the Giants simply, not having enough juice or enough effort, if you will, to compete and get across the finish line. So thanks for the question. Next, we hear from John Lee, who writes, tough game this week. And of course, he's referring to the Eagles game. But I've been underwhelmed with the special teams for years. Coverage has been particularly awful. I know you said Thomas McGay is well respected, but is it time for the Giants to move on? What am I missing? All right, John, thank you for the question. I've said the same thing. If you watched the show yesterday with David Turner, I brought up the topic of special teams. And I said, what's going on? I mean, these guys are still having problems this late in the season with lane integrity and all that stuff. And I even asked head coach Brian Daboll about that in his Monday presser with the media. And it's a variety of things. Here's what, basically I was told. Now, for what it's worth, I do think coaching has a role in it. But you have, again, injuries, which are upsetting the apple cart. And now you've got players that you're asking to play special teams that maybe didn't do it in college, who aren't good at it, who now have to learn it on the fly. And it's, because special teams isn't just a matter of run around the field, hit somebody and call it a day. There is there's lane integrity, there's tackling techniques. Sometimes you got guys playing positions like, for example, offensive players, and, they don't really work on tackling like defensive players do. So that's part of it. I think part of it is also, you got to give credit to the other team, the other team for coming up with schemes and different ways to, do well. So they've got to get credit. But, at the end of the day, coaches will say that it's not an excuse that they have to play better. They have to coach better. Are there things that can be done? I don't know what goes on in the classroom. We're not allowed, obviously, in the classroom, but I think if you were to ask, excuse me, Thomas McGahee about the problems and why they are continuing this late in the season, he'll tell you, I just have to coach better. And really, that's all they can do. I mean, you get better players, you get players that, have played special teams before. That's why there's always such a big emphasis on it at the start of, the summer. That's why they basically put aside like 10 or so spots for special teams. And then when you start losing those guys, or those guys now need to play offense or defense, it's basically, to quote McGahee, it's a pot of gumbo. You grab whatever ingredients you can get. And sometimes you're going to have a pot that tastes really good. And sometimes you're not going to have a pot that tastes good. So that's kind of where they're at with that. But I'm curious to see what they do with special teams. If they do make a change in the coaching ranks, maybe they, I don't know, add somebody, maybe McGahee moves on. I don't know. Too soon to really say, but I think it's a compilation of everything that you have to look at. And I'm not excusing the coaching, by the way, because, again, lane integrity, I mean, you're looking at the film. I mean, if you can't show these guys what lane integrity is and how to do it properly, there's something not getting passed down in the translation, so to speak. So we'll see what Dable does with that. But, that's certainly a point that I raised in my article over on Giants Country, that special teams has just not been good all year long. Basically, you can go back to last year, too, when they had a similar situation. So thanks for the question. All right. Mark Lawrence asks, we say Golladay that was active against the Eagles but logged no catches or targets. Why? Obviously, the coaches don't want him and he doesn't want to play, so why keep him? Salary cap, Mark. They cut him now. They're going to have his $4 million guaranteed in next year's cap accelerate into this year's cap. They have 2.8 million as I record this in cap space. So do the math and you'll see they have no choice but to carry Kenny Golladay. But I am fairly certain he is not going to be on this team next year. So we have another question about Golladay coming up, which I'll save for later. It's a cap related question, but that's why the Giants have are keeping Kenny Golladay. All right. Next question comes from CC Michael Nixon. Unless he signs for what the Giants want, I don't see Saquon back next year. What do you think? Michael, I think Saquon's contract is going to be a tough one for the Giants to get done. I don't think, I could see this going back and forth between the Giants and his agents. My guess is Saquon's agents are going to want to make him the highest paid running back in the league. I don't think that should happen. I don't think he should be paid like a Christian McCaffrey, $16 million plus per year. That said, there are things that can be done with the contract and the salary cap to make it look like Saquon is being handsomely compensated that won't kill the Giants cap down the line. That's what I anticipate is going to be done. Now, whether or not that actually works, well, we'll have to see, obviously, but I do not think that Saquon should be the highest paid player on the team. I do not think he should be the highest paid running back in the NFL. That is not a diss to Saquon. Let me make that perfectly clear. I think he's a wonderful player. I think he's a talented player. I think he's a guy that, you want to make sure is compensated accordingly, but not at the expense of ruining your team's cap. So thanks for the question, Michael. All right, let's see. Up next, Chris, I think this is Chris Partlow. Will you finally admit Daniel Jones stinks and it's time to move on? Chris, I'm not admitting that. Daniel Jones has had an inconsistent offensive line as a result of injuries. He is playing with receivers that arguably would not be on an NFL roster. They are on an NFL roster because they have injuries and just don't have the depth. All right. He was missing his tight end, his number one tight end, for about 4 weeks. All right. Now, I agree with you that a quarterback has to learn how to play with situations not being perfect. But my gosh, when you have a situation where it rains, it pours, how are you supposed to really evaluate this guy? And here's the other thing I think people don't understand. This is a brand new system for Daniel Jones and the entire offense. They're starting from square one with him. And if you look at how things have kind of gone with Daniel Jones, people look at the scheme and they say, oh, he misses a lot of deep passes or opportunities, which to a degree is true. But ask yourself this, is that how he's being coached? Is he being coached to go low high versus high low? Usually when a young quarterback is starting out in a system, they take it's like quarterback 101, so to speak, in the system. And then gradually they advance it. Now, why haven't they advanced it this year? Could be because of the injuries. It could be because of the receivers. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, you're just making excuses for Daniel. I'm giving it to you straight. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Daniel Jones is the reason why this team is in a skid. Not at all. Can he play better? Absolutely. Can he, do some things a little differently? Absolutely. But you know what? He's gotten better with the turnovers. He's gotten a lot better with the red zone, completing red zone drives. There's been some progress made. And I think you get this guy some receivers, you get him, you finish the offensive line rebuild, and you see what you have with him. And as far as money goes, I wouldn't give him a big money contract. I wouldn't pay him like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen. No way. I've said all along, think like maybe a Derek Carr, but maybe not as much. Think like a Ryan Tannehill type of deal. Give him a short-term deal, modest money, see how he does. If he does well, you rip it up and then you give him a lucrative deal for the long term. If he doesn't, then you say, Daniel, nice knowing you, and you move on. But the bottom line is this is a team that can win with Jones as opposed to despite Jones, if you know what I mean. That's something we're taught in the scouting academy. Can a team win with the player or in spite of the player? So I don't think it's in spite of the player that they win. I think it's, with the player. But, make no mistake, Daniel does need to grow in certain areas that he has yet to show. So I'm with you on that part, but I'm not saying that you move on. The other thing I will say, that you got to look at where the Giants are going to draft. If they're drafting in the low teens, early 20s, they're not going to have the juice or the assets to move up to get a top-notch quarterback. And who's out there on the market that you could honestly see grabbing that would make a notable difference? Not a whole lot of guys. So these are all things you got to take into consideration. If the time comes that Daniel Jones is not the guy, then I think the Giants, as they build up this team some more, then maybe they make a move for a quarterback. I don't think that's going to happen this year as of right now. So thank you for the question. All right. Let's see. We have a question from Mark Lawrence. What is the dead money hit after releasing Kenny Golladay? All right, Mark, I'm going to give you, starting over here. All right, Mark, I'm going to give you two sets of numbers here. Post-June 1st and, pre-June 1st and post-June 1st. If Kenny Golladay is cut before as a regular transaction pre-June 1st, the dead money hit is $14.7 million. The cap savings, $6.7 million. If he is a post-June 1st transaction, he is, let's see, they save $13.5 million and they get hit with a $7.9 million dead money hit 2023 and a $7.9 million dead money hit in 2024. All right, so that $13.5 million, this is why I say Golladay is going to probably be a post June 1st cut. That's going to be enough to sign the draft class, plus have money left over to tweak the bottom of the roster as they get into the summer. So that's why I am 99% certain that that's the route the Giants are going to take. Even though it means they'll carry dead money into the following year's cap, it won't be as bad because the cap, remember, is going to start to go up. So thank you for that question. And I hope that makes sense. I know salary cap stuff sometimes is a little confusing, but hopefully that makes sense to you. All right. Next question comes from Foreshadow. Following up with you regarding Tamon Fox, could he play inside linebacker? You know what? I still don't have a concrete answer for you, only because based on the snaps he's taken, he's played on the outside. I will poke around. I promise. I will poke around. I'll get back, see if I can talk to the kid to see if he's been taking snaps at inside linebacker. But I just don't have a concrete answer for you right now. And I apologize. I just haven't run into the guy or run into the people that I need to run into to kind of find out what they're thinking. But just kind of based on what he has done as an outside linebacker, I'm just going to quick read you what we wrote at Inside Football about Tamon Fox's performance against the Eagles. He actually got some of the snaps that O'Shane Zimenez would have played at as an edge defender, an edge contain man, and wasn't very successful on the edge. He came up empty on the stat sheet while getting handled on nearly every one of his contains. So that would kind of suggest that maybe he would be a fit for inside linebacker. But again, you're going against the Eagles. So let me do a little bit more poking around. Maybe I'll have an answer, hopefully I'll have an answer by the end of the year. So I'm not trying to put you off. It's just I don't have a complete answer here and got to really study. And, plus I want to check, with a couple of people and see what they think about it. So let's circle back on that. And then I should hopefully have an answer for you. BetOnline is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game, both college and NFL. And BetOnline doesn't stop there. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the games start. Hey, Giant fans, thanks for making the LockedOn Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out LockedOn Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only LockedOn can provide. LockedOn Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody. We are on a Twitter Tuesday here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traynor, your host. And I want to thank everybody who sent in questions. We've got so many in today's mailbag, and I love it when we get a lot of questions that come in. And a lot of the questions, there's some overlap here and there, but a lot of the questions do cover different topics. So I do want to thank everybody who sent in questions, and I'm doing the best I can to answer all of them, give you some research and, everything you need to know in response to your question as best as I can. So thank you again. Let's continue with the batch. All right, we just did foreshadow, so let me take that one off the screen. All right, so up next we have Elizabeth Contreras, I think it is. What do you think about Hodgins? Would you keep him next year? You know what, Elizabeth? I think I would. I like what I have seen from Hodgins. I don't know necessarily that he is a number 1, number 2, or number 3 receiver. I think he's, more of a special teams guy, if I'm being honest with you. He's definitely, looks like he knows what he's doing in this system. Um, although, again, a lot of it is based on, I guess, chemistry with the quarterback. So he's done a good job with that. Special teams, Hodgins hasn't. I don't think he's played special teams really for the Giants. I know he did for the Buffalo. I'm looking at his Pro Football Focus snaps. He played. Looks like he played just 3 special teams plays when he was with Buffalo. Hasn't quite done it yet with the Giants, but you wonder if perhaps he can do it for the Giants. He's certainly, good height, 6'4", 209, decent, decent blocker. He had. I'm just looking here with the Giants. Yeah, he's a good blocker, run blocker. Let's see. Just looking at his receiving stuff here. Blocking is key, like I said, for a downfield receiver for the Giants. Let's see, as a receiver, 17 of 20 receptions. That's an 85% reception rate, 187 yards. That's 11 yards per catch. They worked him primarily outside, but he can also play in the slot where he's done so a little bit. The yards after the catch, not really good. 45 yards after the catch, 0 drops, 2 of 3 uncontested catches. So yeah, for the Giants, he's boasting a 139 target rating, which is not all that bad. So yeah, I would say, he definitely earned a chance to come back next year and compete, but I do not think that he is a number 1 receiver. Like I said, I think the Giants really need to address that position, get a number 1 receiver, and get multiple receivers in here. Whether they bring Darius Slayton back, they'll have Wan'Dale Robinson back next year at some point, but they're going to have to redo that group. So thank you for the question, Elizabeth. All right, up next, we have a question from ESPN Bound. Why did they elect to play Barkley on a pitch count instead of just shutting him down? Ensure he's fresh for Washington. Banged up Barkley does our offense no good. Okay, I actually wondered that as well. And then I thought, okay, Brian Daboll, his philosophy has always been, if a guy is cleared by the medical staff to play, they're going to play. If you don't play a guy that can theoretically go out and play, you're not giving your team the best chance to win. Now, yes, Barkley was on a pitch count. Daboll can call it whatever he wants, a plan, a pitch count, whatever he wants to call it, that's fine with me. But they were careful with him. And I think they got away with, one there. Barkley is no worse for the wear. He did take a few shots in which you thought, oh my gosh, but it worked out for him. So, look, when you're a coach, you want to give your team the best chance to win. And, I think that's why they had Barkley out there. So would I have done it? I mean, I tend to be conservative. I probably would have said, nope, Saquon, you're sitting. I need you next week. But, coaches, they play to win. They don't, even if they on paper don't have a chance to win, they play to win. That's just how it is. So, all right. So thank you for that question. Joe DeMarzo asks, why can't the Giants get X-Tech pads to make a hand wrist cover for McKinney so he can play similar to the old soft cast? Joe, I think the problem here is how stable McKinney's hand is. Just because he had the pins out doesn't mean that the hand is stable enough to where a cast will protect it. Sometimes you get the cast off and you got to build up the muscles, the ligaments, the movement, all that stuff. So that's the impression I get. I question as to whether the hand is completely healed, even though he had the pins taken out. It's going to take time. I would be surprised if we see McKinney this week, Might we see him next week? I think it's too early to tell. When Dable spoke today to the media on Monday, when he spoke to the media, I did not get a warm and fuzzy feeling that McKinney might be ready, but we'll see. It's Monday night as I record this. The first injury report isn't due out until Wednesday, but I have a gut feeling McKinney is not going to be ready. And as far as putting his hand in a soft cast, again, you got to make sure that hand is stable enough, because even in a cast, it's going to undergo some trauma. It's gonna get hit. You go to use it, and you don't want to be knocking that hand around inside the cast. So you got to be careful with that, I think. So that's probably why they're not going that route just yet. So thanks for the question, Joe. James A wants to know, excuse me, DJ strikes me as a guy committed to the New York Giants. I think he likes Dable. This struck me yesterday, meaning Sunday. If you are him, why not move on? I could see him being successful and making more money with another team. Why should he stick around on a prove-it deal? Okay, I'm going to give you a few reasons. Number one, I'm not so convinced that Daniel Jones is going to get a Josh Allen type payday with another team. I don't see that happening. Number two, and this is probably the most important thing, I think it would behoove Daniel Jones to return to the Giants, even if it's on a quote unquote prove it deal. And I don't think it's going to be a prove it deal, by the way, but come back year two in the same system, play faster, take more deep shots. Maybe you start to see some of these throws that you're missing. Why start over again? This is a guy who has started over just about every year of his career, his NFL career. There's something to be said for playing in the same system. So I'm sorry, I disagree with you. I mean, I don't think Daniel Jones is going to get big money someplace else. I think it would be best or behoove him, like I said, to return to the same system that he's currently in. So that's my thought. Whether it's his thought, well, it remains to be seen, but that's just how I see it. Thank you for the question. Giants fan, NY Giants News 26. Do you think this team has lost all their juice? Okay, I think we answered that question in the first segment, so my apologies there. I think that was like the first question we asked. So let's go to George Grossi. Maybe it's because of the second half slump, but am I wrong to think if it continues, the chances are slim the Giants will commit long-term to Jones and Barkley? Yeah, George, I think you might be. Look, Barkley has been banged up. The offensive line, like I've mentioned, has had injuries and no continuity. They're struggling at the second level. I don't see how you could blame the entire struggles of the team to say that, oh, the Giants are going to move on from Barkley and Jones. It just doesn't make sense. If they were playing really bad and they were the cause of the problems, I could see it making sense. But Barkley's been their offense. Now, again, I would not spend big money on him, but he's been their offense. Same thing with Jones. Jones, I wouldn't spend big money on him. I would give him a modest deal for a couple of years and an out. Maybe do a 3-year deal with an out after 2, and just tell him, look, Daniel, we're going to improve the talent around you. If you outplay this contract, we will sit down and we will redo it and pay you what you're worth. But right now, we can't give you, we're still in a wait and see mode. Because as I said before, the Giants at this point, you get the impression that they are at quarterback 101 with Daniel, coming in, learning the new system, learning some new footwork that maybe Mike Kafka and Brian Dable wanted him to learn. They started from scratch. All right. Now, you're saying, well, quarterbacks, they throw the ball and all that stuff. There's decision making involved. There's, fundamentals involved that get changed. So he's coming along, maybe not as fast as some of us would like him to, but we'll see where he's at the end of the year. But no, I do not think that the team slump is a reason to say, see you, Daniel, see you, Saquon. Just don't see it. So thanks for that question. All right. All right. So that's George. We just did that question. Let's see. The next question we have, let's see, should be from, let's see, I'm just pulling it up here. Danny, here we go. Will the Giants look into Matt Arizara? Given, I believe he was clear. Guy was an incredible punter at San Diego State. Danny, I don't think so. Jamie Gillen has been inconsistent. I get that. Sometimes, though, his numbers haven't exactly been helped by his coverage unit. I mean, there's been at least 3 instances I can think of this year off the top of my head recently where the Gunners didn't get down or the coverage team didn't get down to down a ball inside the 5. That doesn't mean that I think that Jamie Gillian shouldn't have competition next year. He absolutely should have competition. I don't know why he didn't have competition this year, to be honest with you. But I don't know that they're going to go in that direction. If they do bring in another punter, I mean, it's possible, I suppose, but if they do bring in another punter, you kind of wonder if it's maybe going to be somebody from the next year's draft class that goes undrafted. Might be a little cheaper to do it that way. That would be my guess. So we'll see. But yeah, punter, I know I've had my concerns about Jamie Gillian's inconsistency, but some of it, you look objectively at the coverage, you look objectively at some of the other factors, and some of it is, his fault, and some of it looks to be his fault, but it is not. So that's kind of where they're at with that one. All right, Giant fans, we are on a Twitter Tuesday answering your questions. Hey, Giant fans, playing daily fantasy based on player projections has never been easier when you visit prizepicks.com. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada, and they offer projections on every sport. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks offers safe and fast withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up. Giant fans, we have a Twitter Tuesday going on here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and we have a few more questions to go on this edition of Twitter Tuesday. Before I get to these last remaining questions, just real quick, tomorrow I'll have a topic to be determined. I don't know that I'll have an interview. I'm working on getting you another interview, but I don't think I'll have it in time for Wednesday's show. Maybe by next Wednesday I'll have it, but so I'll have a topic to be determined. Thursday, we will have the crossover show. David Harrison, co-host of Locked On Commanders, will be back with me, and we will, of course, break down the latest between the Giants and the Commanders and what to expect ahead of Sunday night's big game. And then I'm not sure if it's going to be Thursday or Friday night, but Locked On Giants Live, Traina, Tana, and the dog. Gee, I wish Tana were on the program right now to grade that. Probably would give me about a 7. I think I would give myself a 7 on that too, but we will do Locked On Giants Live because there will be a lot to discuss. Trust me on this one. And it's going to be a great show. It always is with Tana and Bad Dog. So hope you will check all that out. Appreciate you tuning in. Let's get back to your questions here on this Twitter Tuesday. All right. BJTS 2022. Why have the Giants played bad for the past 5 weeks? If I had that answer, the definitive answer, I think the Giants, John Mara would probably pay me enough so I could retire. But no, seriously, it's a combination of things. Number one, this roster, this is year 1 of this roster rebuild. And I think a lot of people forget that. You look at how people say, oh, the Giants were outclassed by the Eagles. They were no match for the Eagles. But I think people forget that the Eagles had 3 years to build up that roster. The Giants are only in year 1 under Joe Shane and Brian Dable. So can we please give the Giants, a little slack here? I know, we're all sick of the losing. I'm sick of it. I have to cover it. I've said to you many times, it is harder to cover a losing team than it is a winning team. So believe me when I say I would rather cover a winning team because it makes my life easier. But you have to be patient here. This is a new regime. I think they have the right men in place. Give them time to build up this roster. Give them time for these systems to take root, for them to finish their evaluation. And then let's see where we're at when it's all said and done. I think that, they're better than they were last year. So let's see where they're at when it's all said and done. All right, next we have Pete M. Another year of leading the league in injuries, bad O-line, and lack of receivers. Have the Giants put enough talent around Jones to really assess whether he should be the franchise quarterback? Do you think he is the franchise quarterback? Pete, I think you answered your first question. Bad, the offensive line, the injuries, the receivers. I mean, kind of obvious that the answer to that question is no, Jones doesn't have enough around him. Do I think he is the franchise quarterback? Long term, I don't know. Do I think he is the best option moving forward for next year? Yes. And I say that because, again, I think the Giants are going to draft in the low teens, maybe in the 20s. They ain't trading up to get a top quarterback. It's just not happening, not with all the needs they have. There's nobody really out there on the market to sign. And I know somebody had asked a question about Baker Mayfield coming up, which I'll get to in a little bit. So Jones right now, I think is the best option that they have. I mean, Tyrod Taylor, they signed him to be the backup and possible starter if they move on from Jones. I'm not sure he's going to be any better than Daniel. So for now, yeah, I think he's the best option. I know people don't agree. Daniel Jones has been a very divisive type of topic, but that's how I feel right now. So, all right, let's see. We got Pete there. So next up, John Smith. Is it time for the Giants to get a new special teams coordinator? Talked about that a little bit earlier in the program. I don't know if it's time to swap T-Mac out. Again, T-Mac, very highly respected, and he's not a bad coach, but you kind of look at some of the factors, and you can't excuse coaching from the decline that we've seen in special teams. Like, for example, I mentioned before, one of the problems is with lane integrity. Well, isn't the coach supposed to teach you how to do that? Even if these guys, these college kids never played special teams before, and now they're being asked to do that. That's what coaching's all about. You teach them how to do it. And maybe it takes some time for them to learn, but it starts with teaching. So I'm curious to see what happens with special teams as well. I keep hoping that they pull it together, but they're making mistakes this late in the season. That's a concern for me. Definitely. Okay. Johnny Ballgame. What was the official ruling on the punt yesterday? Was it a fumble followed by an illegal kick? Curious why it wasn't considered a drop kick. All right. Let me find that particular play in the playbook here, the official game book. I'm trying to think when that happened. Was it, all right, that wasn't in the second quarter. When did that punt happen? Was it in the first quarter of the play? I'm looking for the actual play. Jamie Gillian, just bear with me a second here. Okay, it wasn't in the first quarter. I don't think it was in the second quarter. Oh, no, wait, here it was. It was in the second quarter. Okay, so the official game book, this is how it read. It said, Gillen punts 15 yards to Philadelphia, 42, down by Carter Coughlin. Penalty on Gillen, illegal kicking loose ball, 10 yards, enforced at 43. So it wasn't a free kick. I think in that situation, I'm pretty sure, I think you have to call for a free kick. And that wasn't, they didn't call for a free kick. So I reached out to a former college official to get some more clarification on that. Haven't heard back from him. So I don't have a definite answer for you now, but I'm not sure why that wasn't a drop kick. I think maybe because the ball had hit the ground and he tried to kick it once it hit the ground. I think that's what happened there. Whereas if he had just dropped it and, a drop kick is basically just dropping the ball and kicking it, or kicking it off a tee. So it didn't really fit, I think, the definition. So, but I'll see if I get some clarity on that. And I can always circle back to that question in the Giants Country mailbag later in the week on Saturday if I hear back from the refs. So thanks for the question. Curmudgeon 60. Early in the season, the offense looked creative and aggressive and efficient. Lately, it's been the exact opposite. Why is that? Is it injuries, lack of talent, lack of faith from the coaches, or something else? Injuries, lack of talent. Actually, all the above. Despite what the coaches say, I think there's a degree of, okay, we don't have the guys we thought we were going to have, and now we have to tailor to what we do have, and maybe what we have now isn't quite as good as what we thought we were going to get. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't see the Wildcat anymore. We don't see as much pre-snap motion. Some creativity that we saw early on from the offense is gone. So yeah, I agree with you on that, but I question how much injuries have had to do with it. The different lineup changes, the offensive line changes and all that stuff. I'm sure that had something to do with it. So hopefully it comes back. But yeah, that's missing for sure. All right. Excuse me. James A. All right. We answered this question too. Apologies for this stuff, guys. Usually I number these questions and sometimes I'm not sure if I saved one, so I save them again. So actually we answered that question from James. All right. So a couple of email questions. Pat L writes, I was wondering if you can shed some light on why the current Giants team that will just be getting out of salary cap hell would want to spend a lot on a receiver in his 30 plus year seasons with a history of, okay, you're talking about Odell. Basically, he's asking about Odell Beckham. Why would the Giants want to spend? All right, Pat, the Giants are going to do due diligence on everybody. That doesn't mean that they're going to sign everybody. There is no harm in having Odell come in to have a conversation, to check out his knee, have the doctors check out his knee, to sit down with him and get a sense of, has he grown up? Has he matured since he was last here? There's no harm in that. Now, that being said, Beckham apparently is not going to be ready to play until the playoffs, if at all. So there is no point right now in signing him, obviously. None. Next year, is there a point in signing him? I would say probably not. You cannot make decisions based on nostalgia. All right. Now, I know a lot of fans would love to have Odell back. I get that. But if you're rebuilding, starting from scratch, and you're building this team in the GM and head coach's vision, you got to get your own guys. Now, can Odell be one of the guys? Sure. But ask yourself this, how's he going to react if they hit a rough patch? How's he going to react if he's not the center of attention and gets gets the bulk of the targets every year or every game, I should say? Has he grown up? That's the biggest question. Personally, I found the whole tour that he did. I mean, look, you have a right to do a tour and find where you're going to eventually work for. But this publicity, especially what happened down in Dallas, where it just seemed like camera people were there to capture every move. I just, that was a turnoff for me. I think the Bills and the Giants were a lot more discreet with hosting him. But I don't know. I don't know if he would necessarily be a fit for this culture. I would like to think he's matured. I've always liked Odell, but, when he was here, there were some maturity issues. Let's not kid ourselves. I don't think he will sign here. I would be surprised. Giants have a lot more needs. Some contracts maybe they want to extend. So, yeah, I don't think it makes sense. Sorry, Odell fans. I just don't see it making sense. All right, final question comes from Rob P. And this is the Baker Mayfield question. Do you think G-men stick with Jones or consider bringing in Baker Mayfield as an upgrade, or just keep Taylor and draft future quarterback? Rob, I'm pretty confident when I say Baker Mayfield's not an option here. Baker Mayfield, he's on his third team. I don't see him as an option here. And as I have said before with Daniel Jones, the Giants will probably be drafting a lot lower than they have in recent years. They're not going to be in the top 10. I don't see that happening. And if that is the case, you're not going to get a top-notch quarterback unless you trade up. And you're not going to trade up when you have as many needs as this Giants team has. So I don't see that happening. Now, if something funky were to happen and Daniel Jones were to not resign with the Giants this year, or I should say next year, that's why they have Tyrod Taylor signed to that contract, which can go from being a backups to a starter's contract. I think Daniel will be back next year, whether it be on a 1-year deal or what I think makes more sense, a 3-year deal with an out after 2. I think he will be back next year for the reasons I said earlier. Year 2 in the same system, a chance to grow, hopefully better talent around him. There would be no reason for him not to come back. And I know other teams are going to be looking for quarterbacks, but you know what? Sorry about that. How many of those teams are actually going to be in a position to, afford the quarterback? Especially the teams that are drafting higher up or projected to draft higher in the draft order. So I just think the Giants are going to sign Daniel, again, to a shorter term deal. If he outplays it, then great. You extend him. If he doesn't, then you move on. This won't be the only year quarterbacks are going to be available in the draft. People are acting like it is. That's not the case. So that's how I see that playing out. All right, everybody, that is all the questions. I told you it was a big mailbag today. So thank you to everybody who sent in questions. Apologies for some of the technical difficulties if you were watching on YouTube. You probably noticed I went with a new format on YouTube for the graphics to kind of make it look a little cleaner. So a little cleanup on my end, and I should have that nice and smooth it out for next week's show. But thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We will be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of the LockedOn Giants podcast. Until then, everybody, have a great day, be safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.